The federal government has described as opposed to the controversial National Water Resources Bill as ill-informed, insisting that the bill, which is already before the National Assembly, is an amalgamation of water resources laws that has been in existence for a long time. Minister of Information and Culture, Lai Mohammed, made the clarification yesterday at a joint press conference with the Minister of Water Resources, Suleiman Adamu. Arise correspondent Jamaka Ode was there, and she filed on this report.
The return to the National Assembly of the executive bill seeking to control the ownership of various waterways in Nigeria by the federal government has been generating controversy across the country, with some claiming that the bill is a subterfuge for the reintroduction of Ruga, believed to give unhindered access to herders. But the Minister of Information says those criticizing the bill are ill-informed, as the bill contains nothing new but an amalgamation of existing water laws to make it relevant to modern dynamics in line with global best practices.
There's nothing new about the National Water Resources Bill. This is because it is nothing but an amalgamation of water resources laws that have been in existence for a long time. There's nothing new about the National Water Resources Bill. This is because it is nothing but an amalgamation of water resources laws that have been in existence for a long time. These are the Water Resources Act, Cap W2 LFN of 2004, the River Basin Development Authority Act, Cap R9 LFN 2004, the Nigerian Hydrological Services Agency Establishment Act, Cap N1100A LFN of 2004, the National Water Resources Institute Act, Cap 83 LFN 2004. The overall objective of the amalgamation is the efficient management of the water resources sector for the economic development of Nigeria and the well-being of all its citizens. The bill, when passed, will ensure that the nation's water resources are protected, used, developed, conserved, managed, and controlled in a sustainable manner for the benefit of all persons.
The pursuit of a consolidated water bill started in 2008, and after adjustments, it made it to the 8th National Assembly, where although the House of Representatives passed it, the Senate stood it down. The federal government is now seeking the support of Nigerians, saying when passed, the bill will be beneficial to all.
This was never a Buhari bill. This is a water bill for Nigeria. And it was started the process started long before even the draft was completed in 2008 by virtue of the Constitution and the Water Resources Act 2004. And under that act, the Minister of Water Resources has tremendous amount of authority.
All right, let's go straight to Dr. Bati. I mean, the papers this morning are awash with talks about the water bill. Dr. Bati, your take on this?
Well, you know, the water bill has been very controversial since it was brought before the 8th National Assembly. And it's interesting to hear from the Minister of Water Resources that the 8th National Assembly did not shoot it down, that what the 8th National Assembly did was to refer it to a committee, and that what the present Assembly, starting with the House of Representatives, is trying to do is to just continue from where the 8th National Assembly started. But what is very clear is that, one, the federal government is very desperate to push this bill through. And the kind of statements that the Minister of Water Resources and the Minister of Information that they were making yesterday would seem to give an indication that indeed there is desperation behind this. And that, in a sense, also makes the bill suspicious. This is a bill that has been condemned by virtually every ethnic nationality from the Middle Belt to the South. The Middle Belt Forum is against it. The Ijaw Nations Development Group is against it. Professor Wolushenka wrote a whole article drawing attention to it. Afenifere has condemned it. Ohaneze Ndigbo has condemned it. The Senate of the National Assembly is divided right down the middle. And what are the issues? One, people are saying specific provisions in that law, in that bill, as proposed, sections 1 to 3, and also section 41, 42, give unnecessary powers to the federal government, unitary-like powers to control water, its usage, and its resources across Nigeria. And in the view of the critics, this is a violation of the principle of federalism. Two, the critics also argue that this is an attempt to corner water resources in Nigeria for the benefit of a particular part of the country. You know that water has been at the center of this farmers' herders conflict. Okay. And if the federal government can control it, then, of course, you know, people will be restricted access to water. Three, they're also saying that the law, one of the provisions is that if you want to dig borehole in your house, you must take permission from a National Water Institute that is in Kaduna and a National Water Commission that is in Abuja. Nigerians are saying no. They should have control. This is also about resource control. If I want to dig a borehole in my house, I don't have to come to federal government. The same for borehole drillers who are business people. Why must they go all the way to Kaduna or Abuja for approval? So these are the issues. And I think that the federal government saying people are ignorant, they don't know what they are talking about, should just be cautious. Water has caused war before. Yes. We cited the example here of the Six-Day War, the Six-Day War over River Jordan between Israel and the Arab Gulf countries. And water is a major source of conflict around the world. So we should be careful. We should measure our rhetoric. The stakeholders should be allowed to have a say. It should not be a law that anybody will force down the throat of Nigerians.
Because this rhetoric of it's a done deal, Tundu.
What I want to say is that we're in a democracy. The only thing that I agree with the Minister for Water Resources is when he says this is not a Buhari bill. Indeed, it is not. The National Assembly must be more alive to their responsibilities and truly represent their constituents. Everybody, well, most people have rejected this bill. The National Assembly ought to have reflected that. It's so completely against public opinion. It should never have been passed in the first case.
Dr. Bati, the talk about not having a public hearing on this.
Yeah, they're saying that it was debated by the 8th National Assembly, and so there's no need to discuss it again. The Nigerians are saying we want to discuss it.
There is.
The job people are saying no, we want to have a say. Okay. You can't come and take our water with just one bill that we didn't have input in.
All right, thank you so much. That's all on Headline News. Take a short break now. When we return, we'll have the duo of Rotu Zadira and Aaron Akerjala to give us updates on Africa business and COVID-19. Stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show right here on the Arise News channel. And dependable Rotu Zadira is here to give us Africa business update. Rotu's over to you this morning. A lot to talk about.
Yes, a whole lot to talk about. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning, Tundu. Good morning, Doctor. Yes, so surprise, surprise, the Monetary Policy Committee, they cut the rates by 100 basis points. Yesterday, you know, sister publication This Day spoke with a whole number of analysts, and everybody thought that they would keep it in place. So the monetary policy rate has been reduced by 100 basis points from 12.5% to 11.5%. The asymmetric corridor is the band around the benchmark rates. I know that the benchmark rate is the rates at which the central bank lends to banks. So plus 100 basis points on the high end is the cost above the MPR at which they would get funds from the bank. And then the minus 700 basis points is on the low end, the return on their deposits with the bank. So Governor Emefiele, the central bank governor, during reading out the minutes of the communique of the MPC, did say that they want to make deposit money banks continue to lend. There's, of course, the loan deposit ratio that's already out there. They want to push more funds out into the economy. So by adjusting the asymmetric corridor, they are reducing the amount by which banks can get returns and increasing the costs at which they can borrow from the CBN, and essentially trying to push more funds out to the economy. So that's the adjustment in the asymmetric corridor. Cash reserve ratio is still at 27.5%. Liquidity ratio is still at 30%. If we look at a chart here that compares the monetary policy rates to inflation, the top inflation target range, you see that horizontal line, red line at the bottom. The band for inflation has been supposed to be between 6 and 9%. We haven't seen that since 2015. Inflation now is outpacing the benchmark rate, which is at, again, 11.5. Inflation is at 13.2. Normally, you would raise the rates to head off inflation and entice investments coming into the country, but unfortunately, Gordon Emefiele, the central bank governor, referred to the structural challenges that the country is facing with respect to the increase in fuel prices, with respect to the increase in electricity tariffs, and with respect to the increase in food prices as well. So these things are challenges and pushing inflation upwards. Now, there's something else also to be said. There was a very key excerpt from the communique where he talked about the role that the central bank is going to be playing with respect to the economy. He says here, the committee was therefore of the view that to abate inflationary pressure, it had no choice but to pursue an expansionary monetary policy using development in finance policy tools targeted at raising outputs and aggregate supply to moderate the rate of inflation. At the next part of this quote, he says that at present, this is key here. I want everybody to please focus on this. At present, fiscal policy is constrained and so cannot on its own lift the economy out of contraction or recession, given the paucity of funds arising from weak revenue base, current low oil prices, lack of fiscal buffers, and high burden of debt services. You can look at 4 of those as 4 body blows to our economy. He's essentially saying that on the fiscal, and Doctor has talked about this several times, and how fiscal policy has to support monetary policy. But here is an excerpt from the communique essentially saying that the government can't, so the central bank has to now step in to do what it can. And finally, the final excerpt here, they said therefore that monetary policy must continue to provide massive support through its development finance activities to achieve growth in the Nigerian economy. This is the reason MPC will continue to play a dominant role in the achievement of the goals of the economic sustainability program. So, you know, if you look at Jerome Powell over in the United States, right, he said that, look, the Federal Reserve, that's the central bank in America, can only do so much with tweaking interest rates. The fiscal side has to add more support, which is why you've seen Democrats and Republicans continue to go back and forth about this second stimulus plan. So that's on the fiscal side. They're pushing them. Here in Nigeria, it's the reverse. There's not enough support on the fiscal side, so the central bank has to now, you know, step up. In our sister publication this day, there is a story on the Anchor Borrowers Program. The CBN Director of Development Finance Department, Mr. Yila Yusuf, saying that 374 billion naira has been injected into the smallholder farmers of the Anchor Borrowers Program over the last 5 years, right? So this is the thing we have to look at now when we talk about spend. I'm giving that as an example because that's one of the development finance tools, the Anchor Borrowers Program in the agricultural sector. Central bank is also using intervention funds for manufacturing. There's also intervention funds for healthcare. There's also intervention funds for entertainment. The central bank is everywhere. There's a concern as to the balance sheet of the central bank. This money isn't coming from thin air. So, right, you've got a balance sheet with your assets and liabilities. All this money you keep pumping out into the economy is going to have an effect on your balance sheet on the liability side. Also, there's the return on the investment. With all this money that's being spent, where's the return? Let's take a look at year-on-year growth for agriculture. I've circled two points of this chart here. If you look at Anchor Borrowers Program started in 2015, right? You look at 2016, year-on-year GDP growth for agriculture peaked at 4.5%. Since then, it's dropped. Right, it's dropped. Q2 2020, the circle at the circled part at the blue chart at the end. Agriculture grew by 1.5%. Population growth is at 2.6. Right. Let's move on to the subsectors of agriculture. This is crop production. This is primarily where the smallholder farmers play in. And this is where the bulk of that 374 billion to the smallholder farmers has gone. Again, quarterly growth, you can see it's dropped. Look at livestock. Livestock, in fact, was even negative Q4 2019. It's back to about 0.85%, I believe, for Q2 2020. It's not on the chart. Let's look at forestry. Forestry also at 1.08% for the most recent quarter. It's never peaked past more than 3.4, 3.5%. Fishery, another subsector of agriculture GDP, that's done okay, 5.6%, outpacing population growth. So if you look at these subsectors and say, okay, all this money has gone in there. How much growth have we seen coming out of the sector? It underlines the concerns of the amount of spending that is going into these sectors. And that concern is, one, the balance sheet of the central bank. Two, are these development finance policy tools, are they wide enough? The central bank has some very important intervention funds, which has assisting SMEs and also households. 9% was the rate. They cut it down to 5% to blunt the effect of COVID-19. I think in March of next year to go back to 9%. Those intervention funds are very effective, and you're borrowing at 9%. That's a single-digit rate, and now it's going further down to 5%. So, but are they wide enough? Are they effectively getting to enough people? That's the second concern. And then third, as we've just seen with those charts, what is the return? Are we seeing in these sectors, manufacturing, entertainment, will we see the corresponding growth in GDP for those subsectors that effectively reflects how much money has been put in there? So, look, it's, you know, right now it's not an easy place where the central bank is in. They're doing the best they can.
Rotus, a lot of people argue with you that these injections take time. Because the central bank is just gradually easing into this. And you say the central bank is everywhere, but when you look at it critically, that's what can really salvage most of these sectors. When you look at the antecedents of the things that have gone wrong, when you look at how these sectors have been stifled in the past by myriads of issues, issue of insecurity is one of them. We keep talking about the logistical chain problem in the agricultural sector. Insecurity. Lack of infrastructure is another one to it. I mean, these issues have lingered for so many years. I'm talking upwards over 25 years. So this injection by the central bank, and probably if other physical measures come in, you know, like infrastructure and the likes, and creating that enabling environment, it will take time to start to see the results of all of this, because things have gone bad systematically over the years. The value chain we used to know is not what we have. Take fishery, for instance. I mean, these are the things we will look at very strongly. What has affected fishery? What has affected our waters? What are the role of sea trawlers that come into our waters unabated and take our fish and things like that away? Some other issues like that. So it will take time for all this intervention to start to manifest.
One second. I mean, the chart. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, while it is true that it takes time, Rotus, I think you already raised some very critical questions that should be addressed. The CBN is fast emerging as the government within the government, and is doing the kind of heavy lifting that we're not sure it even has the capacity to take on. You asked a question about the balance sheet of the CBN, Central Bank of Nigeria. Many people are concerned about that. Two, yesterday you were saying, well, the central bank is likely to maintain its wait-and-see posture with regard to managing rate of inflation, which is what we have seen in the United Kingdom, in the US, even in Japan. Then all of a sudden this time around, and it's interesting that the decision was not unanimous, all of a sudden the CBN will seem to have given up on inflation, because the report was talking about stagflation, right? Yeah, inflation plus recession, plus recession, right? So is it that the CBN has given up? In spite of that, that communique by the CBN governor was optimistic that there will be improvement in the first quarter of 2021. Now, what is the guarantee that that will happen? What is the guarantee that these banks would lend more money to people on the basis of the reduction of MPR by 100 basis points? And then more importantly, where is the Minister of Finance? The CBN, as you pointed out, is providing the money. It's going to provide 1.1 trillion to run the economic sustainability agenda. Right. Now, where is that 1.1 trillion going to come from? When the CBN itself admits that there is low revenue, low crude oil prices. And then at the end of the day, what is the CBN doing? Are they printing money? Are they going to print money? And do you know anybody who has benefited from these intervention funds? In the US, once people started receiving their checks, they came out and talked about it. Do you know anybody who has been talking about receiving money from any stimulus package?
Oh, I mean, those are very valid concerns, and that's why I said let's work on the structure. The structure is really important. I mean, I remember a report. It was attributed to what's her name now, Ibukola Woshika, that said most of the top lenders in this country go to about 60 or 100 BVNs. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ruth, if you remember that report.
I believe so. Yeah.
I mean, so there are factors like that, but most importantly, we can't leave the economy to smother.
Very true.
And these things will take time.
Very true. But see, on that last point on taking time, if we can pull that chart up again, year-on-year growth for agriculture. The Anchor Borers program started in 2015. Go look at the charts. When it's fallen. So if you talk about time for these things to improve, growth in agriculture has fallen over the course of time that money has been pumped in there. So exactly. So that's just something to take into account over what's actually been going on with the
Rotus, you got me there. I'm not saying anything any longer. All right, for updates on COVID-19 pandemic, Aaron Akejola is here with us. We'll go for a quick break anyway. We'll come back with Aaron. Back still, the morning show right here on the Rise News channel. Updates on COVID-19 pandemic. Nobody does it better. It's Aaron the Bearer.
Yeah, good morning to you, Rufai. Doctor, good morning.
Good morning,
Tundu.
Aaron. Good morning.
Always a pleasure. It's good to see you. And let's get straight into it as we look at the numbers.
I see you were measured this morning. We didn't want Rufai's problem.
I tried to tread with caution. So we'll be doing one day on, one day off. All right, so getting straight into it. Looking at the global figures in terms of COVID-19 numbers for today, and we can actually see over 31 million confirmed cases, 31,605,656. As a matter of fact, the WHO are actually giving a very, very grim look at how things are actually growing exponentially in terms of the numbers, saying that in the last 7 days, we've actually seen almost 2 million additions to this particular number. So at the moment, it is really going really high as we are seeing major second waves in some other parts of the world. Now, speaking about second wave, let's actually get straight into the world figures as they actually help us with the graphs there. Certainly, you will get to see that these are some of the places that we are seeing a major rise, a continued rise in the number of COVID-19 cases. We're seeing in Argentina, Indonesia, Iraq, and Ukraine. We're seeing major rises there. For places like some of these places, they are still in the first wave, as they would like to call it, or the second peak of the first wave. Moving on also, this also helps us looking at the European bloc. Spain is still rising very high, same as France, the UK, we'll be talking about the UK in a moment, same as France, Italy, and Germany. These are some of the places we're seeing rises in cases. The next one actually explains it further. You can actually see the rise in Spain. Spain is actually certainly in the second wave as we speak. Major restrictions are actually happening across Spain, same as France also. We can also see another second wave rise there. In the UK, majorly, a lot has actually happened in the UK, and in Italy also we're seeing a major rise there. Germany, I must say, the handling of COVID-19 has been stellar and has given I beg your pardon, has given the Prime Minister of Germany, major kudos and plaudits, because they've said that the way she's handled it has been stellar, and it has actually helped. People are even talking about maybe she running for the fifth time. Let's see how that one goes. But to the US, where there have been major talks about how things have actually unraveled in the US in terms of COVID-19. Looking at the figures actually coming in right now, over 6.9 million. As a matter of fact, they are even fearing that by tomorrow, there might be as much as 7 million confirmed cases of COVID-19. You can see in the last 14 days, it's up by 13%. And the one that has got people cringing has been the number of deaths being recorded. Yesterday, it passed the 200,000 mark. As of this morning, it's 200,731, up by 1%. Major devastation we've seen. The United States has remained the epicenter of COVID-19 in terms of case fatalities and also cases themselves, as can be seen there on our screen. Now, moving on, it actually even helps explain it, because as it passes the 200,000 mark, of course, weekly average is now about 800. That's in terms of deaths, 800 deaths per day. And this is a little bit lower, understanding that sometime in April, they were recording well over 2,800 deaths per day. So that might be a silver lining, but it must be noted that over 70% of those who have died in the United States were above 65 years of age. I must say that is almost wiping out the elderly in the United States. Now, southern states like Texas, Florida, and also including California, are seeing the most deaths. As a matter of fact, it coincides with the fact that these are some of the most populous states in the U.S. And also 6 out of every 10,000 residents in the United States have had COVID-19 at some point. So those are some of the statistics there. Mr. President, a little bit further, in terms of deaths, you can actually see where the cases are actually rising in North Dakota, South Dakota, Wisconsin, Oklahoma, and also looking at the deaths in terms of COVID-19. So other places that we've seen, like we just mentioned, the places like Texas, Mississippi, North Dakota, Florida, where we also see massive deaths there in COVID-19. Before we come to you guys quickly, now let's cross over to the United Kingdom. A lot of talks have been about what is happening in the United Kingdom, and they are claiming that they've not entered into the second wave because they are still expecting more numbers to come as they actually hit the winter period. But looking at those numbers on our screen there, certainly you can actually see that the numbers have actually risen in the last 14 days by 91%, and that has got the United Kingdom government worried. They've taken actions for both Scotland, Wales, and the UK itself. So let's see what becomes of this particular execution. Boris Johnson has been on the burner for quite a while because they've claimed that he has dropped the ball heavily in terms of the handling of COVID-19, same as Donald Trump in the United States. You can actually see that in the last 14 days, deaths have also risen by 96%. Over 41,000 people have actually died from COVID-19 or COVID-19 related diseases in the United Kingdom. President Folder, let's actually still look at it there. You can actually see that so far Boris Johnson spoke yesterday and he gave a litany of restrictions in terms of COVID-19 and what to do in this second to prevent the second wave. And he says that office workers are being told to work from home if possible, and penalties for not wearing a face mask, especially gathering, because remember the rule of 6. If you are going to enforce the rule of 6, you must put on a face mask if it's supposed to be more than, or face a fine of £200 for first offenders. Second offenders could be more. And from the 24th of September, which is this Thursday, all pubs, bars, restaurants, and general entertainment centers are restricted to stable services. Takeaways can continue. And from Thursday also, hospitality venues must close at 10 p.m., which means shutting them and not calling for last orders. And also face masks, face covering must be worn at all times in taxis with passengers from today.
Thank you, Aaron. What struck me the most about Boris Johnson's address is that he's getting a lot more pushback from his own conservative backbenchers. Yes, he's getting heavily criticized for having flip-flops. Remember, he was on this huge drive, get Britain back to work, and all of a sudden, it's now back to work from home. Exactly where do we stand? And then
even in schools, it's been
and all of a sudden, he's taking it all back. But I guess you could say, if you want to be charitable, that he's just responding to events as they're unfolding. You can't continue to just be stubborn and insist that people return to work when the cases are climbing. And when there's such a shortage with tests as well, it's going to be an absolute fiasco. So I guess he had to make this point. And also with the army, what is the role of the army? Because he did say that the army will be rolled out. That's causing some concern.
The role is to enforce the new measures that have been applied if the people refuse to respect those rules. And you talked about the rule of 6. The rule of 6 has now been replaced with the rule of 6 months, as one newspaper in London this morning pointed out. And the fear is that if after 6 months the numbers do not go down, then there could be a second lockdown. And that lockdown is nationwide. In Scotland, the same measures have been adopted. The only difference between Scotland and England is that in Scotland, the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, has also placed a restriction in meetings of households indoors.
You can't have visitors from another household.
Yes, that's precisely what it means. And scientists in England are also saying that England should also consider the same measure. In fact, the scientists are even disagreeing with Prime Minister Boris Johnson that this does not go, the measures do not even go far enough. But what we have seen in the United Kingdom is an attempt by the state, the government, to respond to data, scientific data, and to respond to the reality that they are confronted with. Now, there are British people, people in the UK saying, oh, Boris Johnson has spoiled Christmas. But he says it's a sacrifice that the people will need to make. And there are two sides to his speech, the hard measure side, and also his optimism that at the end of the day, humanity will win. Now, if you go to the US, which you also refer to, in the US, President Trump, I'm surprised you say the number has passed the 200,000 mark, which nobody thought would happen initially. But President Trump is still insisting that it affects virtually nobody.
Imagine.
So is President Trump living in mass?
Contradictory, I must say.
You know, the other day, you brought a story about where he was arguing with the CDC, US CDC Director Robert Redfield.
Yeah.
Now, Robert Redfield will seem to have been vindicated now. And I hope, and I suspect, and it will probably happen 6 weeks from now, the handling of COVID-19 is going to be a major factor in the U.S. election.
Oh, yes.
If it's not a major factor, I'll be surprised if President Trump is allowed to get away with the way he has handled COVID-19.
Now, Doctor, I think I should point you at this point.
Okay. Angela Merkel.
Yeah.
Can you even imagine?
You can't imagine. No, the point is, I think I should point here, before I come to you quickly, that since you just mentioned Angela Merkel, she's been heavily praised for how she's handled this. And I think we've seen leadership crisis or leadership deficits actually play out in the handling of COVID-19. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon, like we actually mentioned for Scotland, they've claimed that she has handled COVID-19 and its rigors better than Boris Johnson.
But she has.
Yes.
And Arlene Foster of Northern Ireland. She's done well.
I want to come in here. All the women, look at it all over the world, all the women leaders have handled COVID-19 better. But Tunde, you said something about Boris Johnson, but I'm not shocked. What do you expect of a man that one of his first stories was a made-up quote? That was why he lost his first job in a newspaper. So I am not shocked of Boris Johnson.
No, but it's more so that...
I mean, neither am I shocked of Donald Trump that, you see, Mr. Pottinger, Deputy National Security Advisor, in February, got the dossier out of China that said this thing has got out of hand. If you read Rage, the book by Bob Woodward, and he told Trump, please, this thing is even going to be more than the Spanish flu. Some of that proportion. And Trump took that information and did nothing about it.
Sure.
And now he's denying. I mean, look at them, the two leaders, world leaders, America and the UK, speaks volumes.
You know, the point is...
I would say Boris Johnson is doing much better, at least in spite of the objections to his methods from his own party.
He changed because he had COVID himself.
Yes.
Because he had COVID himself. He almost died from COVID.
So
that's why he changed.
Leaders can learn in the process of managing a situation. The problem we have with Donald Trump is that we have not seen a capacity to learn, to adapt, to adjust, to listen to science. We have seen an obsession with politics. And it is good news that Joe Biden is ahead in the polls and neck to neck with President Trump in the swing states and in most parts of America. And we hope that this time the people of America will realize that they need change and that change will occur.